Find out whether products are safe, that injections work, or a change in behavior has an impact. Animal experimentation commonly is used. In the claim of fact speech, my speaker's subject was animal experimentation. Their claim was that animal experimentation is a cruel way to test products for human gains. But instead of it being a claim of fact, it partially turned into a claim of value by deeming it as a cruel way. Although I agree, my claim on the subject is that animal experimentation is impacting animal lives because of them being tested for products and diseases. The secondary claims that followed my speaker's claim stated that animal experimentation has a negative impact on animal lives, that animals get tested on products that are meant for humans, and that animal experimentation does not always have positive effects. As I continue, I will explain my stance on the claims. For the first claim, animal experimentation has a negative impact on animal lives, I would agree. However, the speaker's speech lacks some evidence as to how animals are mistreated or even how many. As stated on PETA's website, more than 100 million animals suffer and die in cruel chemical, drug, food, and cosmetic tests, biology lessons, medical training exercises, and curiosity-driven medical experiments. Exact numbers aren't available because mice, rats, birds, and cold-blooded animals, who make up more than 95% of animals used in experiments, are not even covered by the minimal protections of the Animal Welfare Act and therefore go uncounted. Fortunately, for the sake of animals, places that once tested on and abused animals are being discovered and shut down. A video on NBC Channel 5 News caught a company in 2010 called Professional Laboratory and Research Services through an undercover PETA video. The video shows technicians throwing beagles into cages by their ears, spraying bleach on them to calm them down, and yanking their teeth out with pliers allegedly to test pain medication. All of which can inflict pain on the dogs, but not all testing is the same. My speaker used a quote from 1992 saying that there is no predictive animal model for HIV infection in humans. However, it is outdated by almost a decade. In 2009, an article by Theodora Hazanulu, who is an assistant professor at Aaron Diamond AIDS Research Center, shows that scientists have now constructed a simian strain of HIV-1 that differs from the human virus by only one gene and mimics early HIV infection. As well, my speaker claims that animals are not given a choice to choose this outcome, but the animals couldn't communicate their approval anyway. The secondary claim stated that animals get tested on products that are made for humans. The speaker depends on their data for reliability of toxin tests, but the quote actually dates back to 1981, which could make the data irrelevant by now. They also explain that cosmetic products are tested on animals and continue off on a tangent by saying Europe banned the cosmetic testing, which doesn't further the point that testing is still going on. The ban also occurred a year later than stated as well, as proven by the European Commission of Consumer Affairs website. The errors or outdated information in the sources make the speaker seem less valid and weakens their validity as a speaker. For the last claim, they said animal experimentation does not always have positive effects. That is true due to the error that still occurs because of the species differences, as well as the harmful side effects of the animals. They explain that there can be errors and that it can be expensive, which support the secondary claim, but the alternatives are placed under the category of not having positive effects. I believe the alternatives should be their own secondary claim because they seemed out of place and threw the secondary claim off. The alternatives include study on humans, cell culture experimentation, and epidemiology, which could be successful as long as they do not contain errors. Brian Nowak Thompson, a chemistry department professor at Cornell College in Wisconsin, says a major advantage of cell culture systems is that we can study the effects of toxins or drugs. But although there are some alternatives to animal testing, it may end up taking a while to figure out all of the needed resources to end it altogether. Animal experimentation is used for multiple reasons, such as finding out the validity of a drug or seeing the impact of a behavior on a disease. It impacts animal lives. It allows scientists to test out new products. It isn't always positive, and it has its alternatives. But as stated by Laura Blue of Time magazine, there is no question that despite the excellent result that comes out of a lot of preclinical trials, the human is the ultimate animal model, and sometimes the potential downside is not identified until it gets to the human.
All right, well, you've got a good statement to start with. I like the idea that you set up with, but you don't really seem to stick to that. During the rest of the speech, you do some of the same things that I mentioned in a couple of speeches earlier, and that is that it seems more like it's an assessment of the advocate's argument rather than a refutation of the argument. There's a discussion of the shift to a value argument on the early points there, and you don't tell us why that's important, how it undermines the advocate's claim, why we should be assessing the argument differently as a consequence, and you certainly don't take up any value position that's contrary to the advocate's position there. So having pointed that out, what's the impact? And you need to explain that a little bit more. In fact, on the first secondary claim, you basically accept the argument that the advocate's presenting, so I'm not sure what's in dispute. The issue of 95% of the animals not falling into the category of the Animal Welfare Act, I'm going, okay, well, that sounds like it could be right out of the advocate's position, so how is this undermining their argument on this particular point? The example of the beagle, in fact, seems like it's a better example than the advocate had on this particular point. The best response that you have in the argument is the challenge on the HIV model, suggesting that the data is old and outdated, and because we have new research, that in fact there's a good demonstration that these animal models can be effective and that they're getting us something that is productive. But then you kind of go back to some of the general challenges and say, well, they're using evidence that's really old and you would need something that's more recent than this, without providing any of the more recent evidence on your own that suggests that these problems are fairly minimal. There's this long discussion about what's going on in Europe, but I'm not sure that I understand what the claim is, either that the advocate was presenting or that you're presenting with that, and that needs to be a lot clearer. Your third point especially sounds like a critique. It basically is an argument about how the advocate organized their point, not really about whether or not the claim is true. The discussion of cell cultures as an alternative and all these other alternatives, I think is maybe relevant to a more general argument on animal research, but I'm not sure it's relevant to the argument that's being presented here. And your closing quote really seems to summarize the advocate's position again. So there's a lot of mirroring that's going on here, and I'm not sure what's being contrasted except the occasional picking on some of the dates of the evidence and the one argument, like I said, that focused on the outdated nature of the HIV models. I thought that was the clearest argument, and that was the point where you had the best dispute. All right.